My name is Art Adams. I'm the Cinema Lens Specialist at ARRI in Burbank, California. And today we're going to be talking about signature primes and signature zooms, plus we have a couple of extra goodies that we're going to throw in to talk to you about. We have 4 cinematographers who will be showing their work today, and we'll be talking to them a little bit about each of their projects in turn. I apologize, we won't be taking questions, but I'm sure you'll be able to find them afterwards if you'd like to approach them, or you can come to the booth if you have questions about the lenses that I can answer. I'll be hanging around the ARRI booth a certain amount, so please feel free to find me. I think we're going to start off with a lovely little film shot by Joshua Stabler. Stabler? I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher your name. I'm American, so the names are going to sound terrible, but I really apologize. Joshua, please come up. Welcome, please have a seat. And if you could tell us a little bit about what we're going to see.
So, hi everyone, and thank you, ARRI, for having me. Yeah, we're gonna see a little film. So, ARRI asked me to shoot something on the signature primes, and they challenged me to only use the extreme focal length. That's on the wide side, it's a 12, 15, 18 millimeters, and on the long side, 250, 280 millimeters. And we shot a little something that we're gonna see now properly.
Let's take a look. Let's roll the DCP, please.
Taking me over, making me older, making me doubt what I say now. Monsters in my head, yeah, they keep on calling, never ending, till the moment you walked in. You've got this hypnotic effect when you're next to me. One look at you helped me forget I was on my knees. Where you go, keeping close to you.
I really like that little piece. It's really, I don't know, it's just fun. But it was interesting that you didn't seem to be afraid of getting close and wide on some of these lenses.
Yeah, to be honest, I was a bit scared only shooting on those extreme focal length because, yeah, we are used to the range in between. That's what we use on most of our projects. And we all know how an extreme wide angle can look on a talent's face. But surprisingly, those signature primes don't have that much distortion. I think nearly no distortion at all, and that's why I really liked digging my camera and my lens into the scene, quite close to the subject, and to me it creates this certain kind of intimacy without really distorting the face too much.
I like the shot where you're tracking along the ground around the feet. It just feels so immersive, like the world is kind of swirling around. It was really, I thought that was really nicely done.
Yeah, and this I realized, or this I learned as well, like with this extreme wide angle, you can do really slow movements and it feels really immersive and dynamic. So yeah, the Trinity shot, quite close to the grass, was really fun to watch. Yeah.
Did you have of the wide focal lengths, which one were you drawn to?
So yeah, I really like the 12 mil. It's extreme, but sometimes a tiny bit too extreme. So the 15, I think I use the 15 just a bit more often because it doesn't. Yeah, the 12 mil is beautiful because you are in the scene with the talent. I was like this close to the talent's face, and it felt like I can see what the talent is seeing. I'm with the talent in the same environment. It feels so immersive. But somehow the 15 felt little bit better to me. Maybe because it's just not that extreme. Yeah.
Yeah. In the U.S., the 15 is the music video lens. They love it because they can get this far away from someone and there's no distortion, but they have a lot of perspective behind them.
Yeah, definitely.
So tell me about the longer lenses.
So yeah, the 250 and 280 mil, really cool lenses, and they normally you use zooms for this kind of range, for this kind of focal length, and here we have primes, so that's really unique. And yeah, I think we all know what those long lenses can do to scene. You have the background often gets way larger in relation to the foreground, and you can create beautiful landscapes behind our subject. So that's fun.
Well, you said something about the bokeh. I wonder if you remember what that was. You commented on it at some point when we were talking earlier.
Yeah. So to be fully honest, I often choose vintage lenses over modern lenses, probably like most of us in the younger generation often do. And what I like about vintage lenses is it feels just a tiny bit less real and more cinematic in some sort of way. But with the signatures being modern, high-tech, sharp lenses, they are modern, but they're not boring, I felt like. And the bokeh is quite soft and creamy, and even skin is a bit warmer than I'm used to from modern lenses, so they are quite interesting.
Well, and that was one of the things that I thought was interesting, is that you commented on the quality of the skin, and a lot of people think that a very, very high-resolution lens is unkind to skin, but it sounds like you felt otherwise.
Yes, yeah. They are. I feel like they're a bit warmer than other modern lenses, and they are technically extremely sharp, but still skin looks really real, and you can see every pore on skin, but it doesn't pop into your eye on the screen. I'm not a lens technician, I can't explain it, but just it feels quite organic.
Yeah, to me it feels like you're just looking at a person. Nothing
Exactly,
really
yeah.
stands out,
Yeah.
it's just I see your face.
Yeah.
But it's not soft like a vintage lens necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting quality. I haven't found a really good explanation for why it happens. I'm just very happy it happens.
Looking forward to it. Cool.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for sharing this, and thank you for shooting it. I think it's wonderful. It's a nice, fun little piece, and it has a very commercial style. And yeah, I appreciate you coming out and talking to us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have another little piece. We challenged another cinematographer to take a fairly extreme lens for a test drive, a 16 to 32 signature zoom. We have Jérôme de Gelache. I hope I said your name reasonably well. I'm
Yeah,
very conscious of that. I
that's fine.
apologize. I'm American. Tell us what we're going to see today.
So I did the opposite exercise with the short zoom from ARRI Signature, and so I wanted to put the zoom into condition. I mostly do documentaries, so I wanted to see how the zoom was reacting with a young talent, and in the fire of the real situation we shot in Paris, and I wanted to see all the different aspects of it, the close focus, the way it reacts, and to see if I could use the zoom the same way I was hoping to use the prime lens from a Signature I knew before. So,
Well, let's take a look. Let's run the DCP, please. You clearly weren't afraid of getting close to her with that lens, because I see it says, there's a close-up like this, and the lens says 16,
yeah.
and she looked great, and the background was out of focus.
Yeah, and so I was really curious about the 16 mil and see how far I could go if we could use it, and also with the wider shot, if all the vertical will be like still straight and everything. And I was very surprised of how precious and how clear this lens was. And also, it's very surprisingly light, because even though the lens could appear to be big, I was actually I was a single user operator. I was focusing myself, and I was dealing with all the aspects because I wanted really to test the zoom in the fire as if I was in real condition when I'm shooting some character in the reality, you know. And so we were in Paris, and so I was really amazed how easy and how fluid the use of that lens was. And also, I was feeling, you know, at the different focal length that the way it looks could really match to the signature prime I used also. And you know, depending the situation you are in, you know, if you need to have like different focal length, it's really good to have a lens that also can have a very a similar look as a prime lens, and that was what I've discovered when I tried the zoom in the real condition.
Yeah, we talked briefly with Joshua about the 15 and how well that does with faces, and I felt the same thing with this lens as well, that it's very consistent, especially in the bokeh and the way it rolls off. They're very similar, and I'm not sure how we did that in the zoom, because the zoom is very complex compared to a prime, but I felt that same thing. Now, is this a look that you embrace as a documentarian? I didn't think to ask you about that earlier.
Yeah, and also you see, of course, you have that look of the short lens, but it's not like too much, you know. It's you have this feeling of being close to human perception at some point, and that was really surprising too, because you have, of course, a distortion, but the face of the character stays very realistic, and so it was very nice to see what they did. And also, what is nice is when you change focus, nothing changes except focus. And that's, with the zoom, sometimes it's quite difficult to have this, softness when you film a character from far away and getting closer and closer. And when you see only the focus, and zoom is such a complex thing to build, and I've experienced that with many different zooms. And sometimes when you change the focus, you can sometimes even have like a focal length difference. And there, nothing was moving except the focus, and that was really nice to experience that.
So it sounds stylistically that you're trying to keep the look unobtrusive in a way. You're not drawing attention to your work away from the subject. You're not trying to get in the... I don't know, am I saying that correctly? It almost feels like you're just trying to be there with the subject.
Yeah.
At a specific distance, you're not trying to draw attention to what you're doing. You're just trying to capture...
No, yeah, and I try not to be too present too. You know, it's really what I'm trying to do when I follow somebody into his life, and when I try to capture his movement, it's like to have the feeling that we are like with the character, and not feeling that I'm filming the character. And that's really what was possible with these zooms. Is like I was able to follow, to be there, but not being too present, and just focusing on the character and the way she was moving, and the way she was dancing, and not being there except to capture what she was giving to me.
I kind of felt that in your working distance. It felt like you tried to be, as you described, with the character, not necessarily shooting them from afar, but you always seem to be within a certain range. I don't know, do you have a preferred working distance when you're shooting?
Yeah, I like to be, depending what I, of course, have to tell, but when you try to express, to be in the intimacy of some character, and so if you are able to shoot at a close distance, it's really nice that you can feel the movement and the way people move and live, and so being close to them and having a lens that can help you to achieve that is really great. And so that's what I did, and I hope that's what you feel.
Yeah, I definitely felt that. No, I really appreciated. Actually, let's talk very quickly about the bokeh and the focus roll-off. Did you? What are your comments on that? I know what I can spin some marketing stuff, but I'd rather just hear what you have to say about it.
I really liked, you know, I've tried to shot like, I tried a full open, and I tried to shut it a bit more, and what I like is like really the bokeh and the background really are detached, even though you are a very short lens. That's the most difficult thing with short lenses. It's when you film, it's you lose this, you know, the depth of field and everything, and there you are still able to really, of course it's large format, and at the time there were not that much zooms that were a large format. Now there are much more on the market, but back when I did the test, there were like less zooms, and what's difficult when you have short lenses is to have this feeling of depth of field, and I really was amazed by the way you can really separate the characters from the background and have something really beautiful. And also what I liked is like you can shoot in front of the light source, like here was obviously the sun, but and also a window, and the image is still really clear, and you can, after work with the color gradist, you can work the footage in a very precise, and because the image is still really clear, and the way the sun and the way it comes into the lens is really nice and clean, so you can decide if you want to burn the background or keep it, and you have all the infos needed, and it's not too, really, you can decide what look you want to give, because the lens offers you the wide range of artistic field you want to go into. So if you want to make something like a music video, like I did at the beginning of the little video, I did like some movement, and I was like with color lights and everything is clean, and is really, I like the color rendering, and also the way it gives the skin this, you know, this softness, and I didn't put any filter because I really wanted to see the raw thing, you know, and yeah, I was really happy and surprised by the way this zoom behaved.
Yeah, it looked beautiful, and the reason I asked that was even at T4, it seemed like there was a fair amount of rolling out of focus, and it was really interesting. Yeah. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming and talking with us.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a little break from lenses, and we're going to talk about a little bit of color science. If we could turn the lights down, please. So this is a quick preview of something I'm going to present on Thursday at 1 p.m. We're going to talk about the new color science. So what you're going to see here is one setup out of 5 or 6 that we shot recently in Los Angeles, using a mini LF and then processing it through the old color science and the new reveal color science. The new reveal color science, of course, is what is in the Alexa 35. So this gives us a great way of showing exactly what the differences are. And there will be a lot more detail if you come to the event on Thursday, but this is the short version. So this is the old color science, and here's the new color science. Now what I'm looking at, oops, that's not me. Oh, there we go. What I'm looking at primarily is right up in here. If I go back and forth, you'll see a significant change. There's a lot more distinct hues and a change in brightness. And that's a big part of what's going on. So with the new color science, we basically completely rewrote the color code. So the color code that we had that was mapping the data from the sensor before was really good, very popular. You probably know this. We've now made it better. It's extremely accurate in terms of placing hues precisely, but also mapping the perceptual brightness of hues, which with the toolbox we were using before, which is the common toolbox that a lot of manufacturers use, that was more difficult to manage. And we are now using a tool that allows us to map these tonal values very precisely. So you can see the difference there. Practical example, I like looking at, well, not just the quality of the red, but also the fact that the shadow side is a bit darker. And this is something that I'll go into a lot on Thursday, where there's a phenomenon with the old color science that I never noticed before until I saw it, the new color science. It almost feels like sometimes someone has taken a brush with some watercolor paint of a hue like I see it in flesh tone, purples, greens, and it's almost like you've gone over it and you've brought the shadows up a little bit. And with the new color science, because we're able to map the colors, the tone of the colors so accurately, it feels like contrast increases just a little bit. It feels like things snap just a little bit more. Not in terms of sharpness, but it's difficult to describe, but the best way I can say is it's the difference between that and that. Now, before I show you this, I'll just lay out the ground rules. We did this very, very basically. The stills were captured in your ARRI reference tool. There was no grading at all. Basically slapped on the default look and exported stills, and that's all we did. There's some extra stuff to notice here. You can only apply this look to the mini LF if you shoot ARRI RAW, and it can only be applied in post because we don't have the processing power to put the new color science into the Alexa 35 or into the mini LF. In the Alexa 35, it's no problem because it's a 24-volt camera. The mini LF is a 12-volt camera, so there were some compromises made. But the look you will see is exactly what you would see in an Alexa 35. So we really tried to stress the camera by choosing a set with strong colors, built-in neon, LED lights, and colors that traditionally we've had some issues with. For example, we are known for having reds that when they're very bright and saturated, they shift a little bit towards the blue, which you can see here. But this is accurate. And the way I know that's accurate is we had an X310 monitor, HDR 1000 nit monitor on set. And what I would regularly do is look from the monitor to the set to see if it matched what I saw by eye. And the majority of the time, it does. I've never seen that in a camera before. And I'm going to give a little shout out to La Croix water. Those cans that have the funky, funky colors. The first time I noticed this phenomenon, we were showing rental houses the camera very early on, and we had some cans in the middle of a conference room table. And I aimed the camera at them, and I had an X310 monitor next to me, and I looked back and forth, and the colors looked the same. Now, I know how easily the brain can be tricked, especially mine. So what I did was I got the same cans that were on the table, I got more of them, and I put them next to the monitor, and I was able to directly compare the two, and the colors tracked. And that's pretty impressive. So blues, another area we had issues with were blues. Our blues tended to be our dark blues tended to be very saturated, and in ACES they would clip. Now, I'm told that this was more a way of how had to do with how ACES was designed because our color science came first, but ACES is here to stay, so we have modified our color science to adapt to ACES. So this deep blue is now a little bit lighter, and it's also a more sophisticated blue. In my presentation on Thursday, I'll show you a blue that in the old color science is it's a pure blue on a sign in the background of a shot. That's a blue that can't be printed, which tells me that we weren't capturing it the way it was in the scene. But in the new color science, it's a very complex color that actually has a lot of blue, but also some red and some green. It's a very sophisticated blue that we couldn't get before. These purples were really interesting, and I'll be showing a lot of these on Thursday. The set had a lot of purple, and we actually added more purple, and the purples tracked really, really well. And something that I found was interesting, and you can't see it here because this is lighting the pillar from inside, but when I added light of this color, and I also had some lights that were kind of a fuchsia, reddish purple, there's a difference between the old color science, which tends to show the light more, the color of the light more than the object it's lighting. The new color science tends to show the object more than the color of the light. The color of the object that's being lit always seems to come through. And it's really interesting because even with skin tone, if you're lighting it with a very saturated color, you can still see the quality of the skin tone underneath it. And of course, everyone wants to see brake lights. So once again, the reddish blue here, and this is a much more accurate rendition over here. And it even happens with subtle reds. I have a number of shots with these lanterns, and the lanterns here, very faintly bluish red, but they were really the warmish red over here. And then this was really interesting, just the kind of random things you find when you shoot a test that you don't plan. This is kind of characteristic of the purples that we saw produced in the old color science, and that's a nice purple. I mean, it's very saturated. This is very sophisticated. It's kind of a blue, it's a little kind of, it's got a lot of blue and green over here, and then it's more bluish red over here. So I never thought I would say this about a reflection, but it's a much more sophisticated reflection than this one is. So this is the kind of thing we're going to look into, and there's going to be a lot more. I actually have a slide that shows you how the mini LF footage compares to the Alexa 35, both with the old color science and the new color science. That'll be 1 o'clock on Thursday. And that's where to reach me if you have any questions, or come by the ARRI booth. I'll be floating around during the show. lensesarri.com is how to find me. So let's bring the lights up again, please. And we now have Steen van der Wecken. Thank you for joining us. What are we going to see here?
We're going to show a season trailer of a new show called Willow, which is a Lucasfilm show for Disney+. And it's going to be aired end of this month. It's an 8-episode show based on the movie from the late 80s, but in a 8 times 45-minute TV show.
Very good. Let's roll the DCP, please.
You think you know what is real and what isn't. What is light? What is dark? Now, forget all you know. Come with me. Willow.
We're looking for the sorcerer Willow. I was told that once long ago you defeated the forces of evil.
You remind me of your mother.
My dear friend, I thought I could prevent all this. I was wrong.
My brother was abducted. The world needs you again. It needs your magic.
Follow me. We must go beyond the edge of our world, into the unknown.
Willow!
I need your help.
Just like old times. Attack! Running! Horses! Mayhem! Mayhem! Happy to see it.
Our true enemy is still out there, rallying the forces of evil. And the only thing standing in its path is us.
I'm going to enjoy this.
If you're thinking what I'm thinking, so am I.
I doubt that very much. Take him to my tent and make sure he's tied up.
I don't know. See, that kind of sounds like we're on the same page.
When I was a kid, I used to play at being a sorcerer, visiting strange worlds, fighting monsters. Run! Never thought I'd actually really do it.
What the hell is that? Trolls. I'm so miffed.
We have to hurry.
How will you defeat us? Same as last time. With my friends.
Wow.
It's nice to see it on a big screen.
Isn't it? You know, so that's how I wanted to start this, is I saw this morning like that, and what struck me was that I had the sensation that I was watching real images of fantastic things. It just struck me that the quality of the images felt like you were just photographing what was there. And that was actually something you had considered, I believe.
That was also a request from the showrunner, who was John Kasdan, who wrote it. And he wanted to have, he told me, he said, let's go for realism, for naturalism, and within the fantasy world. So he didn't want to put a too heavy look on it, because that would drift us away too much from kind of a naturalism and realism. So the choices of the lenses has been done in consideration of a lot of different elements, but this was one of them, because I knew they were they were giving me a very natural picture, especially on the, my stop was mostly around 2.2, 2.5. That was, and in the night sometimes a little bit more open than that. And then there was, of course, one of the other reasons was it's a pretty VFX heavy show. So we had a lot of discussions with the VFX people from ILM just to make sure what they were feeling comfortable with it. And I mean, they would deal with other lenses as well, but I mean, the Signature Prime was definitely a choice they embraced.
I'm curious. So tell me more. I'm curious why they embraced it. What qualities do they appreciate?
Well, I mean, this show I mean, Lucasfilms always wants to have control completely on in post about how the sets look like. So if they find that something doesn't work, then they want to be able to replace it in post, which they didn't do too much, to be honest. But so they LiDAR scan every set just to make sure that they can rebuild it in 3D. But to blend it with the real picture, I mean, the more the lenses are straight and the grids are straight, and the less issues they have afterwards.
Right, and so okay, so I guess you're saying that these lenses were very rectilinear.
Well, I mean, we always do grid tests for the lenses because that's what they need to be able to track that in the post. But they didn't have, because there was not like a heavy fall off on the sides or a very strong distortion on the sides, which you can have with some old lenses. And I mean, it can look very good. I think every project has its choice of equipment which is appropriate to the project, not the other way around. But for this project, they embraced that a lot, yeah.
How did you feel about, there's a lot of close-ups in there, of course, and it's TV, so you're living kind of in here a lot. I mean, how did the lenses play for you in that regard?
Well, at the stop of two and something, within 3 foot of your character, the fall-off is actually very, very nice and very consistent, I think. So it's a kind of, we try to work within that same window. And so I wasn't the only DP. I started the pilot, and I started the second, and I did the second episode. So my colleagues that came after me, we discussed a lot about trying to be in that same consistency of being pretty close and wider lenses. So a lot of 35, 40 was used.
Interesting. I'm curious about, in terms of, let's see, trying to think of what my other impressions were. It just felt very real, and the close-ups looked wonderful. Do you use any diffusion?
Yeah, I mean, I think the lenses can still have a little bit of diffusion, so I always combine it with a very simple, pretty old filter already, which is a Tiffen SFX1, which is a very light version that affects mainly the skin tones. Without blooming windows or without blooming highlights or giving you issues with flares and all that. And it stays on the camera throughout all the lenses. We sometimes take it away when there is when you use a long zoom, for instance, or when we used the 300mm zoom, then we take it off because you can start feeling that it takes away the resolution a bit too much.
So that's an interesting question. So how did the zoom measure up to the primes? How did you feel about intermixing it with the primes?
Yeah, so the first 2 zooms were just available when we started the show, and I got 2 of them. So the 45-135 and then the 65
to 300.
300, which we mainly only used on action scenes on second units in combination with camera tracking vehicles with an arm on it or whatever. So especially in the action scenes or on big exterior sets. And that worked fantastically, I think, because there we used more like 2.8.5 as a stop, and they match superbly well with the primes, I think. Which was my biggest fear always. That's one of the reasons why a lot of us don't like to mix zooms with prime focals.
Right, and that's why I love asking leading questions like, so how much time did you spend at the long end of the zoom? For example, the 65 to 300. Did you have any concerns about getting all the way into the end on it?
No, because we also had a doubler.
Oh, you had the extender as well.
Which is 1.6, if I'm right.
Yeah, 1.7.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, 110 turns it into a 110 to 510. So
we've put it on a kind of a tracking vehicle that runs an ATV type of tracking vehicle with a mini Russian arm and a stabilized head, so that even went through heavy fields, and yeah.
And the performance held up.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, can you when you look back, can you tell which shots are which, or how well does it blend? I guess is my leading question.
Say again.
How well? I mean, I'm always curious how people think that the zooms intercut with the primes, because to me they intercut very well. But I'm always curious. But you know, I work for the company, so I'm curious if you feel something similar.
Oh yeah, I think. I mean, it's just how we wouldn't use them in a stage environment, in a studio environment. So we stick to the primes. But once you get into the field and you get onto location, exterior location, where we had all these big horse chases and battles and all that, the zooms were always on one of the cameras. You wouldn't notice at all in the final result. Oh no, that blended very, 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 very well in terms of color, in terms of the way the out of focus behaves, which is always the biggest difference. It jumps to a total different bouquet, total different out of focus behavior in the background, but that is a super match with the lenses, I think.
Yeah, that's something that I noticed.
I would use it again.
Yeah, that's something I had noticed, is that the bokeh seems to be very similar between the primes and the zooms, and I honestly can't tell the difference on most circumstances, and honestly I don't know how we did that in a zoom, because from what I understand it's a combination of a number of elements, including extremely well-corrected spherical aberration, and to do that in a long zoom like that I think must be very difficult. So I'm very happy to hear you were pleased.
Oh yeah.
Were there any visual effects shots employed with the zooms?
Oh yeah. We didn't even, I mean, we did grid tests once we received the zooms, we did the grid tests and sent them to ILM, and then they just incorporated that into their system. Yeah, we used them for anything we needed them. So we combined it with the primes the whole time.
Okay, did you ever use them at close focus, or was it always kind of...
I think in this case, most of it was pretty less on close focus, because we would be on the primes at that time. But sometimes we had, especially in some of the action scenes, there were so many cameras involved sometimes that they were on different positions and maybe a bit more in the long lenses.
Interesting. So how many cameras did you have?
Well, it was a two-camera show, but I mean, we carried 2 mini LFs and 2 LFs. The big LFs, we used them for a bit of high speed. But then when the second unit started coming in, then that went up to 8, I think. So that's also one reason I think we went up to almost 80 signature primes having on the trucks. So finding 8 sets, it's not easy, I guess, for a rental company.
And actually, when we were talking earlier today, there is something that reminds me of, you shot another television show with signature primes where you almost literally dragged them through the mud on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, the previous show I'd done with that was Outlander, which is also a pretty big show in Scotland, and then but that's in a very toxic environment in terms of rough terrain, mud, rain, cold, humidity, everything. So we shot 9 months on that, and we didn't have one lens that had to go back to the rental company to be serviced. Although it's all, the equipment is cross-loaded on ATVs and goes into the back of with trolleys and all that. And so it's not taken care. I mean, the assistants take good care of it, but it goes through a rough journey the whole time.
Right. There's only so much you can do when you're bouncing across the terrain. Yes. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming and sharing this today. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take one more quick PowerPoint break. If we could turn the lights down. So hopefully all of you know that we have a rear magnetic holder on signatures, and if you don't, I would like to share that with you right now. Not just the fact that it exists. Originally it was designed for nets. Since our roots are in film, our product manager thought it would be nice to bring back nets and to assist cinematographers in employing nets on the back of lenses, just as a fun experiment. But then we realized we could actually put things on the back of these lenses, optical elements, and change the look as well. So we have a product we're planning, and hopefully it will be out sometime first or second quarter of this year. Rear elements that are similar to diopters, except that they preserve focus marks, which is kind of a big deal. We found that music videos and commercials don't mind focusing by eye entirely, but of course TV shows and features, they would rather have the marks line up, and we have a product on the way that will do that. But what I'm going to show you today is sort of a proof of concept. I had some diopters made at an eyeglass shop in LA, and I shot some experiments. Actually, this experiment goes back a year or two, actually pre-COVID. But these are plastic elements. I've tested both glass and plastic, and I actually have some very extensive tests online. If you ever want to see them, email me at lenses@arri.com and I can send you the video. But what we did was we went through positive and negative diopters. And the negative diopters are fun because you don't normally see those. It's not something you put on the front of a lens, because why would you want to push close focus farther out? You don't push it that much farther out, but it's a very, very different look, and it's definitely worth losing a few inches of close focus. But here's the positive diopter. So what we start to see is a lot of chromatic aberration here. Now, signatures are really, really well corrected for spherical aberration, and that's why the bokeh is so smooth. It has a little bit of a soft edge. It blends very, very, very well. But one thing you see in a lot of vintage lenses is you see this donut bokeh, and it adds some texture to the background. And it's actually kind of nice. What's interesting about the negative strength, and actually if we go one more, we see, I call it arrowhead bokeh. It starts pulling the circles inward a bit, and actually the focal length is probably reduced a little bit, and that's one of the reasons why the image gets a little wider and also a little softer. But this bokeh, I think, is a really nice little touch, especially over here. It's very, very, very prominent. It's not exactly like you would see in every vintage lens, but there are some vintage lenses that definitely have that kind of feel to them. And then if we go, let's do a direct comparison. So we've got a little bit more magnification. So the positive diopter, let's see. Yeah, okay, so the positive diopter pulls it in, but we also have an increase in magnification. And then there's a softening effect. And then we have the vintage donut bokeh. So this strength pulls everything in. The negative is going to push everything out. So if we look at the negative very quickly, so once again we have our regular or no diopter look. We see this shape starting to appear in the opposite direction. And I have to say, I really like this feel. The positive is nice, but the negative really has an interesting smeary quality. And actually, we have some lenses over at the booth, the new ARRI Rental Hero lenses, that are adjustable. And you can actually get this kind of quality by turning a ring on the front of the lens. In our case, you have to put something behind the lens, but it's a very similar look. And I'm very happy we were able to achieve it by adding an element. And there's an even stronger look. This is a really nice characteristic. I really like the feel of how this is smearing outwards and how this bokeh is kind of, it looks like it's got some astigmatism, almost like we're getting a rounding effect. Same thing over here. So this is something that we are working on. Now, this particular set of diopters, it throws focus marks way out of whack. So I loan these out to commercials and music videos, and they don't mind them at all. But the ones that we will be releasing, the focus marks will track. On the positive diopters, you won't need any shimming. On the negative diopters, you will need some shimming, but every lens gets shimmed the same, and there's an optical blank for when you don't want to use a diopter in there. So once again, same effects. Different Christmas ball bokeh. So smearing outwards instead of smearing inwards. And I've got my little, oh, there's the difference between the two. So once again, pulling in and pushing out. And also there's more chromatic aberration. Signatures are exceptionally well corrected for chromatic aberration. And the primes actually show, if you can force chromatic aberration at all, they will show warm and cool. And the reason for that is warm and cool colors don't attract your attention the way green and magenta do. So if they show up, you're not going to notice them right away because we see warm and cool colors in light all the time. But here you can see a little bit of that warmth coming through, just on the edges. And just a little example of how they soften. Very similar effects, but you can see the change in focal length depending on whether we're using a positive or a negative strength. And there's my cheat sheet. And when the product comes out, we'll include something like this. We'll do a lot of testing because I like to really give you an idea of what you should look for and what you should expect so that you don't have to test from scratch entirely yourself. Of course, if that's what you want to do, please feel free, but I will try to make your process as simple as we possibly can. So, now, we have another wonderful short film. If you'd please welcome Setu.
Thank you.
So I really like this film. I saw it online, but then I saw it on the big screen earlier today, and it's a really nice little film. So what are we going to see?
We're going to see, it's a test when ARRI approached me to test the signature zooms. And quite honestly, I wasn't much of a zoom user. And I thought, what would be the circumstances under which I use zooms? And since I started out doing documentaries, and that's when I actually would use a lot of zooms, where you would not have time to change lenses. I also end up using zooms now in action sequences in fiction. Or typically when you have a focal length which is longer than the existing primes allow you. So I just kept these these factors in mind, and I wrote a one-page script, and well, it's here. I think we'll speak about this once they've seen it.
Sounds good. Let's roll the DCP, please.
Sure.
I really love that little film. It's really, really nicely done.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's talk. It looked like, so you spent a lot of time on the long zoom, it looks like.
Yes, a lot of it was actually. So it was written around the zooms I had. I had two zooms with me. One was the 24-75, the other was the 65-300. So I pretty much wrote the sequences around it. And like I was saying, when I would be using a zoom, so the cricket playing sequence, the kids playing was pretty much, you just let them play and you pick up shots and you cut out something from it on the edit. The situation of the two protagonists being about, I'd say 90 feet, that's 30 meters roughly. That was around that much. And to get an OS, which sounds a little absurd, but you know, have a 30 feet, 90 feet distance between the two characters. So that required a long zoom. And then there was the part where in the marketplace, you know. So everything's being written around testing some aspect of it. So the marketplace, the flower market was actually shooting with a lot of available bulbs and naked bulbs and seeing how the lens flares out and how it deals with those highlights and that kind of stuff. So I think when I started in the morning, and this was winter time, you know, all those decorations and you see were actually there in the location. It's not something which we planted. We just maybe moved around a few of them. But they were there when I went to shoot because it's the festive time. And I was really worried about, you know, a tele lens picking up atmospherics, picking up the atmosphere, sorry, and picking up the early morning haze. And you see some of it when the kids are playing in the background, you know. But my big concern was between the two characters because the distance was a lot. But I think when I put my eye to the eyepiece, I was pleasantly surprised. I was not expecting the kind of separation and the kind of clarity and the punch which, you know, the pluck which I got in terms of the separation from the blacks and the mids and the background from the foreground. And yeah, so it was quite a revelation for me. Apart from the sharpness and all of that which goes without saying, yeah.
Yeah, the two things that really struck me, and they struck me again watching this, when you're shooting across between the windows, there's a real sense of separation between the person at the window and the room behind them.
Yes.
There's definitely a sense of those different planes interacting.
And this is despite the fact that I'm shooting with a very compressed kind of perspective because of the long lenses. But you still get a sense of depth, you still get clarity, and it's most of it is shot at 2.8, most of it. And it's not like the fall off is, the background is washed out or something. There's definition, and it's something which I saw, and I was actually quite surprised with the kind of information I was getting. Of course, a lot of it has to do with the latitude which the camera offers, which I think was the LF. But yes, I think the lens itself, the lens contrast inherently, you know, when you put your eye and you see a certain image in the viewfinder, it's the kind of contrast which kind of makes sense to me. It's a very real contrast, which is what I think a subject like this required. You know, if the lenses were too contrasty or too flat, then the definition or the pluck, I would have to work around it. I don't think, I never had time. It was shot on a day, so I didn't have time to, yeah, it was shot on a day, that's what. So I had to like direct and shoot and deal with the actors and stuff. So it was all happening
Wow,
together.
that makes, I'm even more impressed now. You shot all of that in a day. That's really impressive. I grew up in the 70s, which means I love violent rack focuses.
Yeah.
And that opening shot was really amazing.
2 shots, yeah, it was, I mean, part of me felt it was too gimmicky, honestly, but it was something which pushed the zoom. I wanted to see how much it breathes, you know, when I'm pulling about 100 feet. So from the guy, I think it happens twice in the film. Once when the guy is across and the girl is in the foreground with the thermometer, and then when he's on the mobile phone and she's across in the window. So there were violent focus shifts, but like you said, yeah, I think it was something to push, maybe something I wouldn't do normally, but it kind of helped serve the story, I think, at that point.
No, I thought that first rack focus was a really nice dramatic punctuation from outdoor to...
Yeah, it completely takes you into her world, and you...
Exactly.
Yeah, and with the sound and all of that kind of worked for me, yes.
Yeah, so I just felt the way I was so intrigued by the out of focus portion of the image as much as I was the in focus portion of the image, because there's so much color, there's so much light, but I always knew where to look.
Sorry?
Which I always knew, so I guess I find, especially with older lenses, like I showed the donut book earlier, and that introduces hard edges to backgrounds, and sometimes that can lead your eye, because your eye looks for hard edges, areas of contrast. And that doesn't happen here.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't happen at all. I think the fall off is so smooth. And I've actually used primes. 2 shots here have the signature primes. And I wanted to see if I can make out. And I think this film was made about a year and a half ago. And I saw this now before when I was making the DCP, and I honestly couldn't tell between the prime look and the signature zooms, because I think they're very, very close to each other. They look pretty close. And also we have the subject itself was perpendicular to the axis, you know, the walls, the windows, everything. But if you look across, you have definition across, the fall off across, even in these zooms. I'm not seeing any fall off, very little fall off across, really, you know. So that's quite remarkable for me.
How much lighting did you do, since you had to work so quickly?
So I didn't light up any of the nights, actually. All the nights are, nights are available, yeah. And you know, when you say that, of course, it is also a testimony to the camera itself, to the sensor, which can take so much and give you so much information at 800 ASA. But the fact is, with such little lighting now, I have the repertoire of the lenses which I can shoot on now, which is like a 300 mil, you know, on a large format setup. And this was 2 years back. For me, it was quite liberating to be able to do something like that and not having to bother about, you know, how will this be lit up and how will that, because it's a very natural kind of feel, and it works for something like this. So, yeah, actually, it was shot with available light. Yeah.
And you didn't have any problems working at the long end of the zoom?
Not at all. And even typically with the older zooms, you know, and as you would go on to the tele end, your exposure would probably drop off by 1/3 of a stop or a half stop. I mean, I'm used to that. So what I did was for one of the 300 for the 300 mil shots, I shot it on that, and then I just put a 125 prime, and it was 2.8 for both the lenses. It was 2.8, 125 on this, and it was 2.8 even on the zoom. So it was that was quite a revelation for me also. I was like really impressed with that.
Interesting. I'm curious when you graded this, did you feel that there was a difference due to the glass that was used, or
between the primes and the zooms,
or just between using signatures and not using signatures?
Oh yes. I think absolutely. I think the pluck. I keep using the word pluck, but basically it's separation between the different across the curve. You know, you're seeing the separation between in the knee and the straight line and the thing. But the way it renders out the colors and the tones, which I got, especially in the room, the girls' room, which was quite dark. And I didn't want to really reveal her face, so that I've kind of kept her semi-silhouetted before she takes off her mask. But even then, in those blacks, to get that kind of contrast with the lens contrast itself was quite nice. it was very lovely.
Yeah, the shot of her sitting in the bed with the window in the background and
Yeah.
the way the light, it felt like everything was coming in through the window. I think we talked earlier and you were actually adding a little something. But
That was the only shot where I had to add some rim. It was, I think, a sky panel with a diffusion, which kind of simulated the light coming in through the window. But really, I wanted to push these lenses as much as I could. I said, I'm not going to light up and I'm not going to do this. Except for the night. Night, I had tubes and I had a bulb ready in case I had to simulate it on the boys' side and the girls' side. But I didn't have to. They were all shot at 2.8, and I'm shooting like 300 mil on 2.8. And well, hats off to the focus puller also. But yeah, it was possible. It's possible. So on a large format.
Yeah, I have to say, I congratulate your camera assistant on that focus rack and ending dead on. That was really impressive.
Yeah.
I was very happy to see that.
Yeah,
any surprises? I mean, it sounds like you ran into a couple of things that you weren't expecting in zooms, but I'm curious.
I was not. Like I said, moment I put my eye, you know, with zooms, when you're shifting from a block to a zoom on a shoot, I'm mentally prepared to see some kind of a change in the image, you know. It's something, before I put my eye to the viewfinder, I'm almost thinking, okay, this is a zoom, it's not going to be as good, so don't expect that to happen, you know. But honestly, and when I saw through the viewfinder with the Signature, and there was, and like I said, I'm shooting about 100 feet across. It's winter in India. There is smog, and I was expecting a slightly washed out image, but you know, it didn't happen. It didn't happen really, and that was a really pleasant surprise, and the fall off factor, which I think it really held well. I love the fact that you know, I can see the portrait behind the girl, that there is definition. Part of it is, of course, exposure, but also the fall off is usually responsible for that. It's not some washed out, you know, thing, which very often, because I'm shooting at 2.8, but I'm also 300 mil, so I think that's quite something.
Yeah, when I saw this the first time, it wasn't until that wide shot came up that I realized just how far apart those buildings were, because they just don't feel like they're 90 feet apart.
They don't. No, yeah. It's part of the narrative. I mean, you want them to feel close to each other, and I also want that out of focus in the foreground kind of thing. I love that, like a totally blurred OS. I love something like that in the foreground. So it allowed me to do all that. Yeah.
So what was the inspiration for this?
So the inspiration for this was actually the album "I Can See a House from Here" by John Schofield, and it was about two people staying across windows and can see each other, but they don't meet. They can't get together because of whatever. In this case, it was the pandemic, but it could have been any reason. And when I got this, I thought this was a good way to, you know, use that. And so yeah, it's John Schofield and Pat Metheny.
Well, it's a beautiful piece. I think it's
a beautiful
beautifully
piece.
shot and beautifully directed. So thank you very much for bringing it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
And that is our program. So thank you all for coming. And oh, sorry, we have one more film. I guess this will be an unpaid day. Is that how it's going to go? Yes, all right. So I'll talk a little bit about this. Since Eric isn't here, this was our USA Alexa 35 launch film. It was one of the Encounter series. I believe there were 11 shot around the world, and this was the one we shot in California. It was great working with Eric, especially to see how he kind of pushed himself at this. When we talked to him, he said, you know, I'm really very much about precision lighting and planning, but we asked him to work with a director who's used to working very spontaneously and does a lot of work with children in commercials, and Eric totally embraced it. I think the camera was on a Trinity the entire time. We shot in a house in Pasadena, and what was really interesting about it is there are no lights inside this house. So everything you see is, there's no interior lighting at all. There is one scene, it's the flower room that you'll know when it comes up. There's an 18K outside the window, nothing inside. And Eric actually commented that he had a difficult time between the camera and the lenses getting the shadows as dark as he would like. Even though the light sources were visible, it was the outside world. The camera didn't clip and the lenses didn't flare, and he ended up using a lot of negative fill. and then he had to take it farther in the grade. So I thought that was kind of interesting to hear. But he's using I think it's a very light glimmer glass all the way through. But otherwise, I think I'll just let it play and enjoy. Let's roll the DCP, please.
Who's that?
My grandfather.
Does he live here too?
Yes. Beautiful. Darest thou now, O soul, walk out with me toward the unknown region? No map there, nor guide, nor voice sounding, nor touch of human hand, nor face with blooming flesh, nor lips, nor eyes are in that land.
It's funny, I remember being on set and when we were shooting that, and we were upstairs looking at the kids wrapping themselves in the curtains. And Eric was looking at a monitor. We had an X3 10,000 nit monitor, and he, is that there's banding. He was really concerned. He actually went into the room where the kids were and he looked at the curtains and said, oh, I'm actually just seeing the texture of the curtains in the sunlight, and everything's holding, and the lens was resolving all of that. We actually designed these lenses with this camera in mind. So even though these are large format lenses, it really just means they cover large format. You can use them for anything, and of course now we have multiple sensor sizes. But we knew this camera was coming when these lenses were designed, and we know what the next cameras are likely going to be. And we want to make sure these lenses last for the next 10 or 15 years. These are our high-end lenses for the next decade at least. So we want to make sure that we can deliver everything that our sensors can handle. And I think we've done a reasonably good job. If you have any questions, please, as I mentioned before, just email me at lenses@arri.com or come by the booth. And thanks very much for coming. I hope you enjoyed it.